Alright, so we're going to try to solder up a board, and this is a little introduction to soldering. So what I've already done is I've laid out some of the components on the board. Some of them that are going to fall out, I've gone ahead and used a little bit of tape to tape them down. The other ones I have bent pins over to hold them in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is place little solder on several pins for each component just to hold them in place and keep them from moving around. So the first one I'm going to start with is the header pins for the microcontroller. So this is an ESP8266, and I have header pins that are going to hold it in place and make contact with the board. And what I want to do now is, while that board is in there, just solder a couple pins on each header to hold them in place, and then I'm going to remove the board for the rest of the soldering. So to do that, got my soldering iron tip, gonna wet it just a little bit, and then place it for a second on the pin, and then feed in solder from the other side. Get the pin on the other end. Alright, so that should be enough to hold those in place, and now I can take this out. And those should stay straight as long as I don't remelt those two contacts. The advantage of taking that out is you don't potentially put in too much heat through that component, but it also reduces the overall height of the board, so that way if I set it upside down, some of the other components can be pushed against the table to put them in place. So let's go ahead and solder in another couple components. So again, wipe the soldering iron on the sponge, wet it just a bit, and then put some solder on the pin. So this component is falling out of the board just a little bit. So what I can do is I can come to this underside, and while I melt that pin, put a little upward pressure on it. You want to make sure it's not too much, because you can strip the metal off of the board if you push too hard with it before it's fully melted. So gentle pressure. Same thing with this contact. All right. What else do we have? Okay. Remember to keep the tip of your soldering iron clean. Alright, so I'm just going to continue on with this for a little bit, and then I'll come back once I start working on some of the traces.